Hi, I'm Isa Q. Tan, editor of Asian Pork Magazine. Welcome to Asian Agribiz Podcast. Today, my colleague Ha Tu, Southeast Asia Regional Correspondent, talks to Dr. Andrew Yersin and Dr. Alex De Leon of Chemin Industries about the possibility of eliminating pathogens in feed by using acids. Both believe that the strategy is an effective and safe way to protect pigs from diseases and improve biosecurity at pig farms. Dr. Yersin is Senior Vice President for Quality Assurance and Monogastric Technical Service at Chemin Industries in the U.S., while Dr. De Leon is Head of Technical Services at Chemin Animal Nutrition and Health, Asia Pacific. Both have strong background and knowledge in gut health, veterinary nutrition, and feed formulation.
Hello, Andrew and Alex. Thank you for sitting down with me in this podcast.
Hello, it's good to be here and enjoy sharing some technical insights with your audience.
Yeah, me too on my side.
Thank you. Andrew, you had a very impressive talk in our online conference on living with ASF, in which you talked about the risk of ASF virus transmission in feed and how to eliminate them. I think the knowledge is very valuable today. As you know, ASF is still spreading around in the region, and it is the major concern in the pig industry so far, despite the fact that biosecurity has been improved. So I would like to go through the major points of this matter and see how this knowledge can help the industry further improve its feed safety and biosecurity. So let's start with exploring the risk of ASF in feed. Andrew, what have we learned about this issue? Could you update us on that?
Yes, there have been a number of publications across the world, and we've also learned quite a bit relative to the industry and the practices they've put in place. But for the biggest point, we have learned that both raw materials that you may be using in your operation and the finished feed, they both can be a vector based on the exposure and your manufacturing aspects in your operations. Alex, could you expand a little bit, please?
Thank you there, Andrew. Yep, I agree with you. Feed is really a major risk in transmitting the virus. So, but when you look into transmission via feed, you can separate it into two aspects: transmission of the virus from the feed inside the bag and the bag itself. Raw material acceptance standards and handling, and of course, biosecurity protocols in feed processing area are critical in protecting the feed. The bag handling after it comes out of the production is also a risk of recontamination. Biosecurity is your control over this. It will also be beneficial to look at your feed sanitation product if it has enough residual protection to protect feed from recontamination.
Alex, very well said. I couldn't agree more.
Thank you, Andrew.
And what's most important in those aspects is for each operation to develop their biosecurity program for their facility. No one facility is the same. There are some general standards, but the critical thing is for the local team, nutritionist, veterinarian, live production manager, and the feed mill and processing center manager to really huddle as a team and build their own program.
So we have quite a few aspects to look at. So is the risk of virus transmission differ from virus to virus and ingredient to ingredient?
Yeah, that's a great point. We know from various publications that some raw materials are different in relative to their moisture content, their protein content, and how the pathogen will then operate in that matrix. We also know that the viruses are different, whether they be an enveloped virus, a non-enveloped virus, and also how the different epitopes of the virus then react within the feed ingredient to then allow transmission into the animal for replication. So we have to look at all ingredients, minerals, amino acids, the grain sources used, and then the finished feeds themselves. Alex, please.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more, Andrew. Like you said, there are two moving things you want to consider: how the raw materials were processed and handled, and the intrinsic property of the raw material. If the raw materials were heavily exposed to potential contamination during processing and handling, then the risk would be high, no matter what the ingredient is. And some intrinsic properties of the raw material, like what you said, the source of it, moisture content, fat content, are some factors that will determine the ability of that ingredient to harbor viruses. Of course, animal origin byproducts will inherently be more risky than other raw materials, and low moisture, high fat are usually known to help the survival of pathogens in raw materials.
Great points.
I see. So we have all kinds of ingredients and the environment parameters to look at. So Alex, you mentioned biosecurity and feed sanitation products like acid can help feed millers protect feed from being contaminated. So what type of acid is suitable for the purpose of virus mitigation?
So organic acids, are actually acids that you can consider for feed mitigation for viruses. Organic acids have that benefit of not dropping the pH too low in their immediate environment because it depends on their dissociation constant, and they will release their hydrogen atoms depending on the pH of the medium they are in. So organic acids are also known to be a source of energy for beneficial bacteria and also the animal itself.
Great. And in addition, I would also add that when you think of your acids, as Alex, as you said, there are organic and inorganic acids. Many times people get confused. The inorganic acids, such as sulfuric, nitric, hydrochloric, are also extremely corrosive because they're not buffered within your system. Whereas the organic acids, you can buffer them such that you don't have the negative effects on your feed mill processing equipment, especially any operation that has stainless steel or other components where you get that corrosive activity and cause damage to your system.
Okay, so organic acid is basically safer for the animal than inorganic acids.
Safer for the animal and the processing equipment and for the people handling the acids. All acids require some form of personal protection equipment to handle them. Gloves, safety goggles, some may even require a rubber apron of some kind to protect against splashing. And so again, because the inorganic acids aren't buffered, they can cause the most damage as far as potential eye burns, problems with inhalation to your respiratory system, but then also to your skin from exposure. Not to mention, those acids in the feed can also damage the feed itself by causing degradation of the protein, the corn kernel, the wheat kernel, and also interact with the protein matrix.
Oh, so what is the concentration that is safe? Because you mentioned all of the potential damage.
Really good question to ask. And the key piece is for each operation to do a little bit of homework because the safety and the concentration is directly relational to each acid product. As Alex said, the exposure relative to pH and pKa allows the organic acids to work. So the first thing is to test those acids first in a cell culture model to see how they are effective against the virus, but also to check the acids against the equipment, such as a small piece of stainless steel, to make sure that you don't have a corrosivity reaction once mixed with the feed.
Alex, do you want to add anything else?
Oh, I want to highlight what Andrew said on the effect on nutrients. I do agree. If you use inorganic acids in feed, definitely it will have an impact on the nutrient density of the feed, and it might even cause lowering of performance in the farm.
If they are to use organic acid in the feed mill, so do feed millers have to change the formula accordingly when they use it?
Depends on the acid or carbon chain. So you can have short chain, medium chain, and long chain relative to those components. And so depending on the number of carbons and the then hydroxyl molecules attached, they can have an impact on the formula. But typically, in general terms, you're not going to change an energy ratio significantly or a protein ratio significantly, with the exception of, again, the number of carbons and hydroxyl groups you have.
Again, it depends on the acids or the organic acids that's in the diet. Like the earlier comment, depending on the property of the organic acid or blend of organic acid, you will get your desired effect.
So what can be the potential difference in the performance of the pig when it is fed with a diet that has virus mitigated products?
Another good question. And the impact also goes back to the performance of the animal from two aspects. One is the actual consumption and digestion and interaction in the intestinal tract. But the other is, remember, pigs are highly sensitive to olfactory responses by taste, by smell. And so you want to make sure that you've conducted some form of feeding studies. And it can be done in a mouse, because a mouse, a chicken, broiler layer, etc., a duck, and a pig are all monogastric animals. And so you want to at least get a sense of your proof of concept to determine the concentration. If it's too low, you don't get any viral activity. If it's too high, you could actually have the animal refuse the feed based on smell and olfactory sensations. And then that will have impact on performance, such as body weight or feed conversion. Alex?
Yeah, I could not agree with you more, Andrew, on the palatability of feed. Pigs are really sensitive to taste, and you can definitely see it in the feed intake when there's something wrong with the feed. If they taste something that's wrong in the feed, certainly they will have an impact on the feed intake. And also, drawing back, depends on the organic acid or organic acid blend in the product. If it contains a blend of acid that has impact on performance, then you will have more pronounced effect on performance, aside from the livability or decrease in mortality. And I also agree with Andrew. You will be able to quantify the bottom line impact on performance from the data that you get from trials, from these organic acids or blend of organic acids through these sound trials. And the data that you get should be good and clean.
Thank you. Very useful information. And to help the audience have some reference sources if they want to learn more about this issue, Andrew, could you please suggest some of the study of virus mitigation in the feed?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So it's quite easy to do either a routine search. You can use your simple Google platform. Another platform I like to use is called PubMed, PubMed. And with that, you simply put in your keyword. You can put in the virus. You can put in organic acid in combination. You can put mitigation. And as you search, you will see a number of publications dating all the way back to the early work by Dr. Scott Dees, where he published in 2014 examples against both PRRS virus, PED virus, and Seneca virus. He did secondary studies in 2019 and 2020. Dr. Deal also published in 2020, Elijah in 2020, Dr. Light in 2019, Dr. Jones, Cassie Jones at KSU at 2019, and of course all the work that Dr. Niederwerder did in 2019, 2020. And actually an excellent summary of all these papers was just published in 2021 in a full journal compilation that was just fantastic.
Thank you, thank you. So I think we had a clear explanation on the use of acid mitigation virus in feed. I'm really surprised because I'm a non-technical person, but this information is really understandable and interesting to me. I really appreciate it. So now I want to know how to apply this in improving biosecurity at the farm. Alex, you've been observing the pig industry in Asia during its battle with ASF. So what do you think about the biosecurity level in the region? before and after the occurrence of the virus?
This is a very good question. Before the ASF challenge in the region, the industry is already aware of the importance of biosecurity, but prioritization of biosecurity is different from operation to operation. Today, you can see the shift. There's a big shift in prioritizing the biosecurity in the operation. Today, it's on top of the list. And another thing that we're observing is the priority on having a high and uniform level of immunity. It takes up high priority in operations today.
I totally agree with you. I saw that transformation in the pig industry in Vietnam. But if it has been improved like that, is it a good sign? It is a good sign for the industry, obviously, but still we are seeing outbreaks everywhere. It makes me wonder, is biosecurity not enough? Do we still have to think about the feed safety and drink safety solutions?
Good question. You have to understand that biosecurity is risk management. It is grounded on correctly identifying and that prioritization which risks are important to the operation. Like Andrew was saying earlier, from operation to operation, you have general guidelines, but it can differ. You have to be specific for your operation. And then once you have prioritized which are important in your risk list, you need to invest in capabilities to mitigate the risk that were, that had higher ranking. And again, after putting those capabilities in, you need to put in a system to monitor and measure the risk mitigations that you have put in place. Feed and water safety are definitely in the list for high risk and should be considered in the risk mitigation plan. These things, of course, are easier said than done. Biosecurity is a process at the end of the day. It also is dependent on the compliance and engagement of the people that run the process that will determine its success.
Thanks,
Totally.
Alex. I absolutely agree. And the other thing I would add as we look at where Alex talks about risk management and biosecurity as part of that, I like to use the example of how we operate triage in a situation of chaos where there's an emergency room hospital, as an example. The emergency room staff, the doctors, the nurses, all the technicians know that as patients come in, and many patients come in at once, their rules are to stop the bleeding, start the breathing, look for those individuals with minor injuries or small broken bones, and then also look for individuals that they can't possibly help. And then they prioritize based on what needs to be done first and fast. And so just like your overall biosecurity program, you must look at the elements and then prioritize what elements you can do first and second, but then also the cost of prioritization so that you don't waste time or resources on a priority that maybe should be farther down the list.
Yeah, but we still have the overall plan for biosecurity, right, Andrew?
That's correct.
Okay, so let's say we have acid in in one of our solutions to mitigate the pathogens. Does it mean that it is a solution for feed safety? Can I list it in that?
You can list it, as I say, one of the intervention steps. Not any one item can be what we used to call in the industry when antibiotics first came out, the silver bullet, right? The magic drug. So as you look at your solution, you have to look at what you're attacking. There's viruses, there's bacteria, there's mycotoxins, there may be heavy metal contamination of some kind. And so you want to make sure that as you look at your solution, don't limit yourself with only focus on the feed itself.
I agree with you, Andrew. Protecting your against virus, a lot of dimensions, like protecting yourself from COVID. You have your vaccination, you have to still wear your mask, and you still need to do hand disinfection, you're washing your hands. It's the same with feed mitigation with ASF. It's just one aspect of the whole picture of protecting your animals against the disease.
Okay, Andrew, you said that we can look at the solutions and we can prioritize the cost for biosecurity. So if I can eliminate the viruses in the feed using organic acid, should I spend less money on other prevention methods?
Nice question. And for me, it goes back to, again, looking at your risks. And then with those risks, how do I mitigate those risks in an effective manner, but then also with my best cost or best return on investment for the money I'm going to spend. So if I have an opportunity to treat the feed and protect the feed, I also have to weigh in and say, but wait, are my workers, my personnel, are they coming into the facility bringing virus or other pathogens that then could, as Alex said earlier, reinfect the feed? Then I've wasted my money because I didn't protect the workers bringing in my risk. Or the facility itself. Do I have a truck wash? Do I have foot pans? Do I have a general pest control? Are my tools, raw materials, all these elements, have I looked at those individually to say, what can I spend my money on for the best return to limit the risk? I always try and do what's known as a risk assessment. I list my risks on the left-hand side, and then across the top, I would list the elements of what I can do. And then I would assign them a score of 1 to 3. And as then you move across, as the numbers go up at the end, then that's the area I need to spend my most focus on because I can't control those risks.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Andrew, at the beginning of our chat, you talked about the safetiness of using organic acid, the concentration, the safety concentration. This is very interesting because to me, any kind of organic or inorganic acid is a chemical. So does it have any risk for workers to handle it in the farm or in the feed mill if we add it into the feed?
So as you look at your treatments, whether it be organic acids, formaldehyde, or other elements, you always look at them as first, what's its chemical basis? Every product is mandated to have what's known as a material safety data sheet. That sheet is specific to list the risks of use and exposure, spills, inhalation, contact with skin for the workers handling those, either on the farm or the feed mill. So all your intervention steps, if you're going to use a chemical in your process, then you need to look at the safe handling. You need to look at how it's applied, the use of personal protective equipment. Do you need a simple mask? Do you need a respirator? Do you need rubber gloves? Do you need an apron or a protective cloth? And so the simple example I always used is think about the amount of dust that's created unloading a bulk truck of cob meal or rice bran or wheat pollard, and simply that plume of that dust that comes from the truck up out of the chute as it's unloading. That simple dust that's there is a hazard to the workers because they breathe that in. So a simple mask, just like during COVID, your simple surgical mask can be worn during that unloading practice to protect the workers. And so that's how I look at it is first, assess what you're using, look at what the material safety data sheet tells me as a user I should put into practice, and then practice that. Alex, your thoughts?
Yes, I agree with you there, Andrew. Yeah, and it's always, you need a person to run all these things. These are all moving things inside the plant. There's a lot of moving in the plant that will definitely have risk for the people inside the plant. And it's usually a best practice to work with your occupational health and safety officer in assessing all this occupational risks.
Andrew, you said that formaldehyde or organic acid, formaldehyde or organic acid has the beneficial to animal health. So I'm concerned. What about the beneficial or the safetiness to human health? Because I heard that the formaldehyde, when it reaches to consumer dinner tables, it can cause some negative reactions among the consumer. Is it true?
So the first thing we need to remember that formaldehyde as a chemical is listed as a potential carcinogen and cause negative effects based on how you are exposed to it. So first, there is not a risk in the feed ingredient for food products because the levels used in animal feed, when that feed enters the animal's body and the animal metabolizes the feed, the formaldehyde then basically joins the pool of natural formaldehyde that is made in our bodies or the animal's bodies. The formaldehyde is either oxidized into formic acid by natural enzymes and then leaves the body through the urine, or it's further broken down into carbon dioxide and leaves the body through breathing, respiration, and is also incorporated into other of our cellular molecules. The greatest risk of formaldehyde is as a vapor or a gas. So if you think of some of the early uses of formaldehyde that have now been, say, banned in Europe and other countries, it was exactly the use of formaldehyde as a vapor or a gas to disinfect poultry houses, to disinfect hatcheries, to disinfect equipment because of the vapor or gas phase. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, and that's the term that's used specifically in the US, has set standards for the safe levels of exposure to formaldehyde. And so there are permissional exposure limits that are documented over an 8-hour period. And then there's a low action limit as well. And so typically the safety officer of the facility would assess those pieces to make sure that no employee is exposed during any potential vapor or gas phase that would exceed those limits on that basis. Also remember that formaldehyde is in a very large number of commercial products. It's in particle board, plywood, carpet, it's in cigarettes. And so the exposure that a worker would get in the feed mill using products that go in the feed is many times less than that they may encounter in their normal life, depending on the other products they're exposed to. I'll give another personal example. When we've had a number of hurricanes here in the US, we have the Federal Emergency Management Response Team. And at one point, FEMA purchased small trailers that could be used to house people during the crisis. They found out that the manufacturing of those small trailers, the wood carpet inside, actually had formaldehyde exposure limits so that they couldn't use the trailers in the emergency use spaces. And so again, that's just an example of looking at what product are you using, how is it applied, and then the safety associated with the application.
Thank you for your explanation. I feel safer now. So what about the use of formaldehyde in feed for the pregnant animals, like the sows?
Exactly. So again, depending on the regulatory requirements of the individual country, but for the majority, labeled ingredients are required as per feeding trials to show efficacy and safety. That's how they get registered for use. And so any product applied above its labeled level could certainly cause feed refusal based on palatability, olfactory sensations, and could also have the potential to interfere with other ingredients. This is the same for pregnant or nursing animals. So let's look at another simple example. Sodium chloride, table salt, if added above what's needed to be in the formula, will cause significant negative feed, not just refusal, but dietary dysfunction, especially loss of water, and create negative interaction for that animal. So that's where, again, the ingredient, concentration, the label requirements need to be followed specifically for the use. Adding more doesn't always mean you're doing something good.
So does it have any impact on the probiotics? Because I think I see a lot of feed mills are using probiotics in the feed.
Yeah, so so I like to break the ingredient profile into a couple columns or a couple segments. Probiotics, enzymes, and then other nutritional supplements. And so if we just look at all of those, they each have a function in the animal. And so part of your testing of your product and your development of your product to put on the market should be to test your product against those other ingredients to make sure that there's not a negative effect. If we specifically look at probiotics, before the probiotic market exploded, and if I say go back to 2006, 2008, many of the products were non-spore formers. And by a spore former, I mean you have a coat around the probiotic, a hard shell. Think of an acorn or another nut. And so that spore former created a protective barrier against many of the mitigants or antimicrobials that are on the market. Other probiotics are are non-spore formers. They're simply vegetative cells. So I'll give two examples. A probiotic that may consist of simple lactobacillus or bifidobacteria. These are vegetative cells. They are highly negative interacting with many of the mitigants, whereas spore formers such as a Bacillus subtilis product or a Bacillus licheniformis product, those, again, spore formers, are not as susceptible as long as you're following the same concentration. So again, tests and studies to show product development need to include interaction with other feed ingredients.
So what about the sustainability factor? If we use formaldehyde in the feed, will it be completely consumed by the animal? Will there be any part of it discharged to the environment?
Nice question. So as we stated previously relative to the safety of formaldehyde in the feed and then potentially being incorporated into the animal and ending up at the consumer's table, right? The formaldehyde is going to leave the body two ways: oxidized in the formic acid and leaving through the urine and some in the feces, or it's going to be broken down into carbon dioxide and leaves through respiration or simple breathing. It may even be incorporated into other cellular molecules. The good news is it won't leave the animal in its previous form, i.e. formaldehyde, and then be discharged to the environment and causing a negative effect on environmental exposure or sustainability practices by the company. And so for that other reason, I personally like the use of the formaldehyde and organic acid blends to create a safe mitigant for the feed product, a safe ingredient for the animal, and a safe ingredient for the environment with no impact.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew and Alex, for the interesting discussions. I think now the audience has a clear idea of how to eliminate pathogens in feed by using acids. It is an effective and safe way to protect the pigs from diseases and improve biosecurity at the farms. Once again, thank you very much, and we hope to have you again in our podcast with other interesting topics.
Thank you for allowing us to participate, and I wish all the producers that hear this continue to have success in their operations and utilize the products that are best for them, build their biosecurity plans, and have a very successful performance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to this show on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts.